Hi everyone, I'm Emma and I'm co-founder of a tech startup called More Human. At More Human, we're building what we're calling the square space for events. So basically we're making it possible for anyone to become a really brilliant organizer of high quality, well-attended events with actually no previous skills required at all. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's at the age of 29, which came a bit of a surprise to me, as you may imagine. That's around 9.5 years ago now. And at that time, I was working as a creative director for a web agency. And before my diagnosis, I'll be completely honest with you, accessibility was my bugbear. It was the thing that the client threw in, usually at the last minute. And it just turned whatever beautiful creative design I'd concocted and quite preciously pitched to them into something that felt a bit more functional and a lot more crappy. And I really hated it. It was something that really kind of was the bane of my existence as a designer. And I'd usually wonder who the people were that needed bigger text or simpler language and why such a small group of people had so much sway over big organizations. And I'm not proud of that at all. I'm really not proud of that now, being someone that actually requires those things, because I think it's important that I share that though, because I think actually it shows that you don't have to be born an evangelist to actually find accessibility and inclusivity something important that you want to champion. My diagnosis threw me into a world where I suddenly became part of that sort of small group that I'd imagined existed. And there were three things that became screamingly obvious to me very, very quickly. The first being this group of troublesome people ruining my designs wasn't as tiny as I thought, and it actually had a really valid point. Two, that designing for enhanced needs actually helps everyone. And three, that one size doesn't fit all when it comes to tech solutions. There's actually a whole host of challenges people could face that aren't the more obvious sort of disability needs and things like that. There's people who maybe can't afford the internet, or there's people who suffer from anxiety, and you could induce that anxiety with one sort of wrong word or wrong image or something. And some people actually have shock horror, multiple challenges. I mean, how do you deal with things like that? It just opened my eyes to this whole world that I just didn't know existed, and actually suddenly became very valid and very important to me. And narcissistically, it was something that I suddenly required and needed, so my interest grew, which is terrible. I should have been way more interested in it before. So armed with my brand new knowledge and my determination that had come from a very narcissistic place, but had finally sprung on me, I decided to try and solve it. And I joined Parkinsons UK to help them create a testing process for devices and apps. It was quite an unusual thing for an organisation to be doing at this point in time. A lot of people have sort of thought about doing it since, and it was quite trailblazing and quite exciting for us. And I saw the things the participants were actually using, the things they seemed to like using weren't ugly or clunky, and they didn't look like they'd been designed sort of specially for somebody. And I was quite shocked by that, because all the things I'd seen before were in that sort of strange NHS brown plastic that sort of mobility aids and things are made from, and these things look cool. They actually felt like what, you know, my boyfriend was using and what my friends were using. And they had kind of clever hidden hacks and things built into them that just made them easier for people to use. And I learned through this that technology is at its most inclusive when it just fades into the background, really, and it supports humans to be their best selves. And this couldn't have been better illustrated to me than when I was approached by the BBC back in 2016 to be part of a documentary they were making called The Big Life Fix, where a designer from Microsoft created me a bespoke device that helped me overcome my hand tremors and write again clearly for the first time in years. I hadn't been able to write my name for quite a long time. As you can see there, it was pretty scrappy, not very legible. And at the time of the documentary going out, the blogs and newspapers often reported the technology wrongly. So they'd say it was a pen, or they'd call it a watch, even though it didn't actually tell the time. But the interesting thing was they never misquoted my first words on using it. It wasn't a swear word, I was very well behaved. And they didn't misread the look of complete and utter joy on my face. Those two things were always quoted correctly and always documented correctly. And it made me realize that actually what had helped me achieve it wasn't actually as important as actually, you know, the thing happening itself. So actually the technology wasn't the important thing. It was actually the effect that it had on me that people were excited about. It didn't matter what the technology actually was. And now 5 years on, it actually doesn't fit my needs anymore. It doesn't help me with my tremor, but the feelings of self-worth as a designer and the confidence that it gave me to kind of step up and be, you know, a brave person have been changed forever by this watch. So technology actually changed my life in a way that I didn't really expect it to. So when I came to build my own business, More Human, this was something I wanted to really bake into our product. and also the way that we work. So luckily my co-founders, Mel and Duncan, shown here, lovely people, were coming to the process with the same intention, to use technology to basically give people superhuman powers rather than be the magic itself. And we came together on the Zinc Business Builder program, which encourages people to have a really research-led approach to their product and service design. And we really threw ourselves into that. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about how we prioritize inclusivity internally and externally as a team, because the two really go hand in hand and more human. So during the first COVID lockdown, we ran virtual cafes for community groups who basically found themselves without a home and unsure of how to come together anymore under the new restrictions. And we actually served over 1,200 of them at these kind of virtual cafes we were holding online on Zoom. And we discovered that actually most of the leaders of the communities were volunteers, and in most cases really struggling with admin, having problems with people attending and having no one to delegate these things to. And we thought we can help with this. And our software unlocks potential in people to set up grassroots events and be able to achieve really professional results and successes just as an amateur organizer. We're building a library of blueprints, which are events which are designed with the help of a premium content provider. So basically they're optimized to be really strong, really good events that people will want to attend. And they can literally just add them to their calendar. So it's really simple. So essentially our product goal in itself is actually just an inclusive one. It's to democratize event building, to make it easy for everyone to do it, whoever you are, whatever access you have to whatever materials and tools. And the learnings we got from the cafe events and also sort of one-to-one chats really informed this and helped us kind of co-create with our users. And our platform itself has been designed with less confident and less able users in mind. So the Zinc program that I spoke about before actually was, our cohort was focused on helping older adults achieve more in later life. So we're born out of the needs of older users and people with increased challenges. And working on the ground during lockdown with communities showed us just the spectrum of tech capability in both target users and their attendees. And it didn't really seem to be age demographic bound. It seemed to be just a real mix of people that really struggled with using technology and were maybe using it for the first time in this way. So for our primary users, who are amateur event organisers, we've built it in a really modular way, and we integrate with the platforms and tools that they're already using. So it's not a scary first step to try something that's brand new. And for both the organisers and the attendees, the majority of the journey is actually delivered and managed via email, making it really, really familiar to them. So it's not something new and terrifying if you're perhaps not very confident using tech or you have increased needs. You can do it all through something you're already using every day. And we're prioritising mobile optimisation because we know that a lot of our users possibly can't afford a larger device than a phone. A lot of them are using it on the phone at the moment. And we've kept the interface design really simple and quick to load for low data usage, because we know a lot of people will be taking attendance registers and things like that when on site at an event. So if you've got low kind of bandwidth and things like that as well, you're not using all your data just to download our site. And we aim to keep calls to action to one per screen. So we're using very simple language and really large hit areas to try and help users with cognitive and dexterity challenges, which is important to us, obviously something that I know well, but also just to make sure that we're using really plain English and being as simple as we can with the wording. And for the attendees, we're fully white labeled and use things like dynamic terminology. So for example, the organizer can set all instances of the word host or attendee to basically be more suitable to their community. So for example, one of our clients are called 45 Plus Not Grumpy, the best name of a group ever. And they refer to their attendees as not grumpies. So they can basically set that in the app. So basically people know they've come to the right place, and they can set the colors and things as well. So we're completely invisible, really, invisible tech. And they get a familiar look and feel, which doesn't scare them too much, appropriate terminology. And we really think that familiarity is a huge part of inclusivity, to actually make people feel like they've perhaps used us before, or they're not being taken anywhere different on their journey. We make sure we ask and we hold minimal data. So actually for the checkout, we try to keep it as undaunting as possible. There's not excessive form fields to fill in, which can be a nightmare if you've got dexterity issues. There's no countdown clock stressing you out before your tickets are sold to someone else. And we monitor and fix errors in data, things like incorrect email addresses and payment issues. And we often reach out to the attendee with a solution before they've actually realised there's been a problem. So we try to be as quick as we can to sort these things out so that people don't have to spend time emailing us if that's difficult for them to do. And with regards to the events, we put a more human wrapper around all of our event blueprints, so customers can be really reassured that they're high quality, they're going to be well planned, inclusive, accessible, and most of all fun. So this wrapper could, for example, be meeting in a pub before the group travels together to go to the theatre or something. So actually, you know people when you get there, you know you can be able to get into the venue okay because people can help you if need be. And we're hoping to put things into it in the future a bit more formally, things like venue accessibility ratings or other kind of third-party things that will work alongside our app to help people know what to expect when they get to a venue accessibility-wise. We're really keen on co-creating with our customers, which means we have to be a bit vulnerable and open about the stage we're at in our development, which is often quite scary as a startup when you're trying to sort of prove that you maybe be hustling a little bit and proving that you're trying to be kind of bigger than you are. And we often have to kind of tell them the things that we don't know yet, which again is quite scary. But we test our ideas with real users using paper prototypes, which is my colleague Mel, co-founder Mel, absolutely loves doing. This is one of her examples. She turns it into a bit of a game and the beautiful things that we want to keep forever. And this was one about what hosts would expect from an onboarding process that she turned into a game and kind of viewed from above with her camera and talked people through it over the phone. We've also got a resident user who's called Anne, and she works as a member of our team and helps us learn and understand more about our customers. And she's been a client of ours from day one, and we're excited to be able to bring her onto our team part-time so that she can share her knowledge about events and a slightly older adult audience, because obviously we're not of that demographic. We need a bit of help there. We're really big advocates of testing by using rather than user testing. And the fear is with more formal market research that you're always listening to the opinions of the same sort of people. It kind of becomes a bit of an echo chamber because they're people that have volunteered to step up. So they're a particular kind of person already, and they're possibly seasoned interviewees. And we believe that the best way to test is with a diverse audience, which is basically just your audience. So just use them to test it. And I'm really aware that I'm coming from the startup world here, so it's easier to be agile and move much quicker if you make a mistake and you want to make a change. But I think it's definitely possible to adopt the mindset of a startup, get the right people involved and put something out there and see what happens in big organizations if you're brave about it. And it's definitely worth doing because you can get some responses quite quickly to whether something's going to work for you with your actual user group. So we're really prioritizing building inclusivity and accessibility into our product, but also into our culture. And as someone with challenges, I'm a big fan of people bringing their whole self to work, whatever that means. We're a pretty small team. There's just 5 of us plus Anne at the moment. And we've tried from the start to avoid really complex processes because we think that they just sort of paper over the cracks and often you don't kind of get anything solved and you spend a lot of time bogged down in processes. And we try to spend more time one-to-one with each other, getting the support we need to achieve our own goals. And we have a bit of a thing where anyone can suggest any idea or way of working at any time, and we'll trial it as a team and see how we get on with it. So if it works for us all, we'll keep doing it. If it just works for one of us, then we'll find a way to support that person just to do it on their own, if it doesn't work for all of us as a whole. And we run regular what we call ritual resets. So basically we work out if the things we're doing are still valuable and working for everyone. So we don't get too bogged down in internal process, but we make sure we're supporting everyone with the needs that they have to be a worker and more human. So here's a few things that we've trialed and stuck with that might be worth thinking about shaking up the way you're working. And I thought I'd share them with you to see if they'd be useful. So number one, the review and feedback process. We run these things called brain trusts, which I know other organizations use as well. And basically that's a session where anyone can discuss in a really safe space anything they want to share that they're working on. So they can sort of signal how happy they are with it, how finished they think it is, what stage they're at with it, and what help they're looking for before anyone kind of weighs in, so that you know whether someone's precious about it or not precious about it before you give your opinion and how much opinion they want. And this actually came as a response to my own anxiety and cognitive overwhelm in more traditionally structured feedback sessions. So I was finding that I was feeling like it was sort of machine gun fire in my direction. It wasn't working for me. I was getting quite stressed and awkward and perhaps not doing the best job of explaining what I wanted to explain, and then feeling frustrated at myself for not having done a good job of it and not selling it properly. So I guess I'd like to kind of ask the question out to you. Is there a better way that you could review work in your business? Is it a more formal process at the moment that relies on a really perfect presentation to get buy-in for an idea? If you yourself were having a bad day, would you feel like you might let your ideas down? And is the process friendly to those that are perhaps neurodiverse? Could it potentially put barriers in their way to success if they're perhaps not selling their work as well as they could do, or explaining it clearly, or doing a good job of it because they're perhaps stressing out, or anxiety issues are kind of in play? So as someone that experiences that myself, I'd kind of ask you to have a think about your own organisation and see whether that's something that you might be able to help with. So number two, the progression process. Everyone wants to know where they're at in their career, where they're progressing, how they're doing, but we don't run yearly appraisals. We set rolling goals for ourselves and for each other. And we book weekly one-to-ones with each other that we can structure in whatever format we want to do that. So for some people, it might be a more traditional kind of coaching style. For others, it's a brainstorm. For some people, it's a deep focused thought moment where they can sort of sit and come up with something together. And we receive 360-degree feedback during those sessions as well. And I tend to mix mine up a bit because I find that I get different things from different people, and that's really important to me. So I'll have maybe a more coaching style session with Mel because I know that she enjoys that, then a chat with Duncan around developing a product. And then Jai, our junior engineer, and I might spend some time honing his presentation skills because that's something he wants to work on. And Andy and I usually inadvertently end up putting the world to rights because he's a carer for his child. So actually he feels more comfortable sharing his more kind of challenging moments at home with me so that I'm aware of what's going on. And we celebrate wins and really celebrate failures, perhaps even more because of what we get from the experience. We're really big on sort of learning, and we always want feedback. And I think that's something that's kind of made us all on a level playing field. So whatever anyone's challenged with, we're all kind of open to feedback and to learn from that. It puts us all sort of on a bit of a back foot, which is quite interesting. We have a book of wins, which is a scrapbook that we store records of our team wins and things like that in. And things like nailed an investor pitch alongside managed to get out 8 hours sleep in the book kind of next to each other, and each of them has equal weighting. You know, things that are happening at home is as important as things that are happening in work. And I think for us, inclusivity is about thinking about people's whole life and how you can sort of help them achieve what they need to achieve in work when they're facing something perhaps at home as well. So again, I'd like to kind of throw a question back at you. How are you measuring your team's progress currently? What are the benchmarks? Are they central goals that filter through from sort of business strategy above, or are they individual to what a person wants to achieve and what makes them happy? Are you marking someone against goals they can't achieve because of perhaps a disability? I've had that in the past before, and people haven't realized that that's something they're actually doing, or perhaps a cognitive challenge that you're marking them against. Does their home life mean they can't actually deliver to the goal you've set centrally about meeting deadlines, perhaps? You know, perhaps they can't pull the hours that are needed to be able to do that. Or does poor internet connection mean they can't fully contribute to meetings, but their goal was to be more involved? So if you kind of look at things on a sort of person by person basis and what they're coping with and dealing with, actually these goal setting things can feel quite sort of outdated. And actually, if you can do something that feels a bit more flexible, it's going to help everyone to achieve that and to feel like they can actually stand a chance of achieving it. Meetings have become a big deal in the last couple of years, become very virtual, and it's been a challenge for all of us. And even though there's only 5 of our team, 4 work in one building, and our 5th works in Devon. So actually, it's quite difficult for him to often feel like he's part of the team. We have to really work hard to make sure that he feels involved. And even when we're calling him as a group, even if we're all in the same office, we'll call from different screens, because he actually expressed a request a while ago saying that a bank of faces all in one place really overwhelmed him. And if he was at home with his son and his son was kind of kicking off a little bit, the sort of distraction of that was difficult to kind of keep in contact with what was going on in the room. And actually he found it quite difficult sometimes to be present. So virtual working is a new challenge that a lot of us have been facing, and it really does bring with it a new set of rules and etiquettes. And we've put things in place to deal with those moments. So when my Parkinsons really overwhelmed me, or maybe just when you just need 5 minutes to think about something, it's quite difficult being on show. So I'll just say, we've got a deal that I will just turn my camera off, and they'll know what that means instantly. They know that I've not disappeared. They know that I just need that bit of time and I'm still listening and I'm still involved. So again, I'll throw it back to you. If a meeting attendee in your business suddenly turned the camera off for 5 minutes, would you all know what that meant? Would you know whether to carry on involving them or whether to leave them out? And would other attendees find this rude? Would someone who chose to join a meeting off camera be included in the same way as those with their cameras on? Or if you're in a room together? Quite an interesting food for thought, isn't it? And then roles is a really big one for us in terms of inclusivity and accessibility within the business. So how we deal with roles. So I have a lot of challenges. There's a lot of things that I can still do, but there's a lot of things that I really struggle with. And some of you may have noticed that when I introduce myself, I refer to myself as a co-founder, not CEO or CMO or some other newfangled role like Chief Opportunities Maker or something really cheesy. And that's because although we put indicative job titles on our job specs within the organisation, we're actually aiming for something much closer to a Holocratic model. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with Holocracy, a central pillar of this method of running a business is that people are assigned to a number of smaller roles that are much more flexible, but utilize their skills and are much more function focused rather than title focused. So I spoke about the CEO role, and currently we don't technically have one, but we sort of have three. If you split up the functions of a CEO in your mind, it probably fits neatly into chunks. There's things like externally representing the company, building partner relationships and things like that. They really fit my skill set and ability really well, and I love doing them. So that's what I take from that. And Duncan, on the other hand, has a much more suitable set of skills to lead the business strategy. And Mel really loves shaping the business internally, so the culture. And combined, we're actually a really pretty good CEO. And it seems silly to restrict that to just having one person's skill sets. But equally, if you had people with perhaps challenges that they were facing within the workplace, that actually you could kind of split up roles and make it so that everyone's playing to their strengths. So how's your business structured? Does it allow for people to flex and grow into working in the functions they love and thrive in? If one team member was for some reason unavailable, perhaps for health reasons or to support a family member or something, would that part of the business work stream grind to a halt? Do people hold in their heads all of the learnings about their function? Or could you switch roles tomorrow and it wouldn't even make a difference? Or if a designer started experiencing dexterity issues and couldn't design anymore, is there still a role for them in your business? And that question is one that I wish my past agency had asked themselves, because I faced a lot of problems there. So we know, despite all the things we're putting in place, we're definitely not perfect. There's definitely still work to be done. Now, and as we scale, we know as we scale, things are going to be harder to grow in that way. But we know that inclusivity and accessibility within the business and externally for the business will always be top of mind for us. And it sort of has to be when you're called more human. We've made a rod for our own back. So thank you very much for listening. And please look us up if you'd like to find out more. And I'd love to take any questions.